Hello, in this video we're going to talk more about conditional statements and if-else and switch. So just to review what we talked about in the last video, if you have an if condition and you have compound statements, you need to put curly braces around them because otherwise you have no way of knowing where all of those statements belong. For example, if you omit these curly braces right here, then only the first statement would belong to that condition, and then the rest would have nothing to do with the condition. So keep in mind that if you have multiple statements for a condition, be sure to include the opening and the closing curly brace. In addition, if you're just using two conditions, if and else, you do not need a condition or an expression to compare for the else. The else will include everything else. All right, so here is a reminder of how you compare with an if and an else if and an else. If you only want to do one thing based on a condition, then you don't need to put the curly braces. So if x is greater than 0, you're going to add 1 to num positive. Else, if x is less than 0, you're going to add 1 to num negative. Assume these variables have been declared. Else, that would mean it's a 0. So there's no reason to add x equals 0 because if x is not greater than 0 and it's not less than 0, then it must be 0. All right, so here we have this thing that's called a switch statement. Now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do this same kind of a thing that I'm about to do here with the switch. I'm going to do it with if-else first. So we're going to assume that we have a variable called class, that's a character, and we're going to ask and get a value for that class. So I'm going to go back here and do it with if-else, and then we're going to go here and show you how to do it with switch. So with if-else, the way that works is, let's just start here. Assume we have a variable, a character called class, and this is for a boat. And I'm just going to do a couple of examples. I'll do a cruiser, a destroyer, and unknown, but just to make it shorter for the video. So you're going to ask and get a value for that. So then if you wanted to use if-else, you could say if class equals C, or class equals lowercase c. This is because we want to know if it's an uppercase c or it's a lowercase c. And if it is a c, then you're going to printf cruiser. I don't know if this is exactly the same as the switch, but it's close enough. Else, if class equals D, or class equals D, you would printf destroyer. So let's just assume we only cared about C and D, but I think there are other letters like B in the example with the switch, but this is just to show you how they compare. Then on the last else, you would printf unknown. Basically, you're just taking care of everything else. So in this case, we're taking care of C's, D's, and then everything else. Anything that's not a C and anything that's not a D. So this is how you would do this with the if-else. Now if you're using if-else to compare, not for less than or greater than, but to compare if things are equal, using equals, you can do it another way, which is using a switch. And this is how the same thing works with a switch. So you just set it up, you use the keyword here, switch. So the keyword, so right here we're just declaring a variable called class, asking for the input, getting the input, and then printing it back onto the screen. So anyway, but this is the switch part right here. So the way that works is you just put the keyword switch, and inside you put the variable that you want to compare. And it's a block of code, so it has an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. and you just basically for each section you have cases. So here we have case B, and like before we had case C and case D, so this just has one extra case. And it uses a colon, so you need to note that it does use a colon instead of, this is the first time we're using a colon. I also have to note that I really hope that I put single quotations when I was comparing my characters. When you're comparing characters, you need to use single quotations like this to compare the character. And for each case, you could have more than you could do if you wanted to print like a category of boats or something. You could have case B, case X, case. You could have as many cases as you want, and you don't have to have a long drawn out if, or if class equals B, or class equals B, or class equals X. So this is just a different way to do the same thing. The default part right here acts like the last else. Now for my class, I don't care if you use a switch or you use if else. You may have a question that says to use one or the other, but the truth is if you're more comfortable using switch, you can use switch, and if you're more comfortable using if else, then I suggest that you use if else.